all seems hopeless. One
Thank you for the song. I want to thank everyone for participating with Cluster 2 tonight. And I want to thank those who are here with us tonight. Now I'll give you for our word of message tonight to Brother Jenkins.
Thank you, Sister Sharanda, to Cluster 2. Appreciate you all leading us in devotion tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight. It's something about talking in public that I always get nervous. Don't know why. I remember, Brother Perry, I had a speaking engagement on the reservoir at a white church. And we were sitting around the table eating dinner. I'll show you how long ago it was. Tim was still living. And Tim said, Dad, if you can stand up at the national convention, surely you can go to this church. I said, well, Tim, it's a little different. Speaking to our people and speaking to the other people. But I learned this is that as long as you feel a little nervousness, that means you're still dependent on God. When I get to the point where I'm so confident in what I say, that means I'm dependent on Obadiah instead of God. So y'all pray for us as we go through our lesson tonight. Brother Sean, if you put the lesson on the board, we're coming from Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, we're talking about the Ten Commandments. We're talking about 10 Commandments. And I know people now say that we don't use the old covenant, we use the new covenant. We are no longer under the law, we are under grace, and all that is true. But at the same time, son, it says all scripture is given by inspiration of God. So I can't discount the old covenant, even though people say we're not under the law. And Jesus said that he came to fulfill the law, not to do away with the law. So even though we're under grace now, we still have the law to point out when we're doing wrong. The law couldn't save us. That's why we have salvation. But we have the law to let us know when we're doing wrong. I remember listening to Ted Koppel, and Ted Koppel hadn't been on TV in forever. And he said, he opened up Nightline with what God gave Moses, the 10 Commandments were not 10 suggestions. And I just remember that like it was yesterday. And sometimes I think we use that as suggestions. First verse, and God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. The Lord is speaking to the children of Israel, the Hebrew nation. And let me contextualize the lesson so we'll lead up to where we are tonight. And I'm just reminding you of the lesson. Everybody knows these are some of the lessons that we've learned since we were 6-year-olds. Before we knew the Lord, we knew the story of the Ten Commandments. We knew the story of Moses and how Moses was out there walking his cattle, feeding his camels, and the Lord spoke to him out of the burning bush. And of course, we know the fire did not consume the bush. And the Lord spoke to Moses and told him to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let his people go. So the first question I want to pose to you all is, when have you had your burning bush experience? When has God given you specific instructions on what to do? And how did you handle it? We've all had a burning bush experience. We had not always carried it out, but God has dealt with us in a way. Even probably the time you were saved, that could have been your burning bush experience. So that's the first comment, is that when did you have your burning bush experience? And of course, Moses went to Egypt, confronted Pharaoh, told him to let God's people go. And we know about all the dangers that happened to Pharaoh. And finally, not only did he let God's people go, he commanded them to go. And once they left Egypt, Pharaoh changed his mind. So he decided he would go get them. They get to the Red Sea. They got the Red Sea in front of them and Pharaoh's army behind them. The next question is, when have you had your Red Sea experience? At what point in your life that you came to the crossroads and you didn't know what direction to take? We've all had a Red Sea experience. We didn't know what to do, how to say it, or where to go. But what happened? God opened the Red Sea and the children were able to cross the Red Sea. So the point is, when we have a Red Sea experience, let's trust God. Brother Jerry reminded the deacons a few weeks ago. I didn't hear the sermon, but it impacted Brother Jerry, that he shared it with the deacon board. I was out that Sunday, and he said, at some point, we got to just step in the water and trust God. So we're going to apply that principle to anything. We just trust God. It's not that easy. Folk, I don't want to come across as trying to sound like it's that easy that we trust God. The human element is going to always be there. We're going to always have a little hesitation. But at the end of the day, let's make sure we trust God when we have a Red Sea experience. Well, they got to Mount Sinai. And one point I forgot to bring out is when Moses had the burning bush experience, he was at Mount Sinai. That's what God gave it to him at Mount Sinai. So he's gone into Egypt, and he's led the children out, and now they're at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God spoke to Moses again. This is where God, 3 months after they left Egypt, they are at Mount Sinai, and God is giving them instructions on how I want you to live. These instructions on what I want you to do. Before Moses went up to the mountain to get the instructions and came back, he gave the people specific instructions on preparing to meet God. He told them what to do to meet God. God was going to speak to them, but he gave the people of Israel, the children of Israel, specific instructions on how they should meet God. So the challenge to you is tonight, are you preparing to meet God? Just like Moses gave the children of Israel specific instructions. What I've learned and what I know is we spend a whole lot of time preparing to stay here on earth and very little time preparing to leave earth. So the next question is, are we preparing to meet God? Well, once God came down from the mountain, he told them to set up boundaries, very sacred place. He came down and he gave them the Ten Commandments. He sent an earthquake, sent rain, sent smoke. People were afraid, and Moses told them, say, look, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. He said, God is going to speak to us. And I guess it was an experience to know that they had a firsthand experience with God. I don't know what that was like, Sonny, but I'm sure it was amazing. So God began to talk to them through Moses and gave them the Ten Commandments. And I know we don't always use the Ten Commandments in this day and time, but the Ten Commandments is just as relevant today as it was 3,500 years ago. And Sister Ray, I appreciate your prayer and how you recognize how things are so dangerous now. And that's true. That's true. And I my heart bleeds for the black family, how we seem to be falling apart. But I think it's the Psalms you mentioned, Sister Ray. It's Psalms 34 where it says, fret not thyself because of evildoers, for they soon shall be cut off. See, folk, the human element, or in the natural, we can't help but be concerned. But the Psalms is giving us the assurance that he said, don't worry about this. I got this. I got all this in control. And as Moses received the Ten Commandments, the first four is our relationship with God. It says, have no other gods before me. He wants complete allegiance, complete loyalty. And see, we can't really identify with have no other gods before me, because in terms of the Old Testament, in terms of the Eastern culture, well, they had all types of gods. And remember, if you read that verse where it says have no other gods, that's a little g, not a capital G. And they had all types of God in Canaan where they were going. So how can we abstain from putting anything before the Lord in our day and time? We're not going to build a golden calf. We're not going to throw all our jewelry in a fire and melt it down. But there are things in our lives that's causing us not to put God first. As we come to the New Testament, in Matthew, it says, seek God first and other things will be added. So another challenging question is, what things are you putting ahead of God? What are you doing that's taking all your time? I heard a preacher say this a long time ago, and I know I used it before here, Willie. He said, if you spend 6 hours watching TV, you should spend 6 hours reading the Bible. Now, I don't know if we can do that, but the point was, if we commit our time to other things, let's commit our same time to the Lord. I appreciate your testimony last week, Brother Perry. You said you went to the doctor and your numbers weren't exactly perfect, but they were not high enough for you to be put on medication. Well, I was in the same predicament. I went and had my physical a few weeks ago, and my numbers weren't perfect, but they were not high enough for me to be put on medication. But he did give me a stipulation. He said, now, in 3 months, if things have not changed, I will put you on medication. So I knew I had to make a lifestyle change, Sonny. So passing the store and buying a real Coke, I didn't think I could do without it. But once I had the ultimatum of changing lifestyle, I could do without the Coke now. But listen, this is where I'm going with this. Just like I started thinking about my health and how I could do without the Cokes and the sweets, the Lord just kind of showed me, if you can discipline yourself to do without the Cokes and the sweet, you can discipline yourself to study more. Man, I got to thinking about that. I'm saying, Lord, you're right. If I can pass up the Coke and discipline myself like that, well, then I can spend more time in the Word. So the Lord challenged us to do things, and and that could have been one of my burning bush experiences, that the Lord is telling me to study more and to read more. So let's make sure we don't get lost in having other gods before us. The second commandment is no idols. No idols. What are we putting before God when we worship Him? Number 3 is do not take my name in vain. Christian people, for the most part, don't take God's name in vain, not knowingly. If you're a Christian, you're probably not going to do that. But sinners do what sinners do. You know, they can take God's name in vain and not realize they are and not care. But for the most part, I don't think Christians really take God's name in vain. And number 4 is keep the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now, in my studying, I realized that that's the only commandment that's not reinforced in the New Testament. In fact, the resource I was reading from, it gave me a verse in Colossians, and I should have written it down, where you can't enforce the Sabbath in the New Testament, under the New Covenant. But that is a personal conviction with us. See, if you grew up in a black community, there were certain things we just didn't do. Yeah, and I think we've kind of gotten away from it now. I don't think the Sabbath day is as sacred as it used to be, but that's one of the things that between you and God. I remember, don't know if y'all remember Roy K. Moore. He was a Chief Justice in Alabama, and he put the 10 Commandments in the courthouse. And he did it at night because he knew he couldn't do it in the daytime. Once he placed them there, he went and got a local Christian TV station to film it. Well, long story short, he was in violation of separation of church and state. And all his colleagues told him, you can't do that. You got to take him out. And he didn't. He didn't take him out. So fine, long story short, they went and they got the building's maintenance guy, and they took him out, but he was still fighting him in court that the 10 Commandments belonged there. And his reason was that this country was built on Christian principles. And he was right. He was exactly right that the country was built on Christian principles. So my point is, if he went to that extreme to get the 10 Commandments in the courthouse, how extreme will we go in witnessing to other folk? And the last six commandments are talking about our relationship with others. Honor thy father and mother. First commandment with promise. Sean, do you have that clip I sent you in the email? Honor thy father and mother. This is what I was reading the other night, and I saw this, and I said, man, this is good.
And actually getting a commitment from a young lady is their relationship with their parents. Because if they respect their parents, they're going to respect us. If they don't respect their parents, we don't have a shot.
Okay.
It says that's.
Did you hear what she said? Did y'all hear what she said? She said, if they respect their parents, they're going to respect us. She said, if they don't respect their parents, we don't have a shot. So somewhere down the line, we have lost our generation of children. And that's another part of the structure of the black family that we gotta get back to. And I remember people my age and over remember Miss Mag, right? Miss Mag would keep it straight, right? She didn't care what your mama said. She didn't care what your daddy said. She was gonna get you straight. But it's a totally different ball game now. Yeah, you get a kid straight now, you got to deal with everybody. Yeah, you got to deal with everybody. So let's get back to what we're supposed to do. Honor thy father and mother. It says, don't do these things. Don't murder. It says thou shalt not kill, but it's talking about murder. Don't murder. And I know we could debate on this all day when it comes to capital punishment and things like that. I will give you my spiel on capital punishment. I believe in capital punishment. Yeah, but that's just my thing, and you might be different. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimonies. And do not covet your neighbor's stuff. Do not covet. So, John 13, 34, and 35. Jarvis already covered this Sunday, so I'm going to repeat it. When the Pharisees asked Jesus a question, he said, of all the commandments, what's the greatest? He said, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. On this one commandment hangs all this. Is by this all men shall know that you're my disciples, if you have love one to another. Love God, and I'm only repeating what pastors already told us and what Jarvis said on Sunday. Love God, love one another. And on this hangs all the other commandments. God bless you, and may God keep you. At this time, Brother Will, if you come and close us out.
Well, we do thank Brother Obadiah for bringing our Bible lesson tonight. Do we have any announcements before we dismiss? If not, as our pastor says, let us go and be the church. Good night, everybody.